On April 6, 2026, 4 astronauts flew farther from Earth than any human being in history, and for nearly an hour, they looked directly at something no living person had ever seen with their own eyes. What they witnessed on the far side of the moon has scientists still analyzing images months later, and some of what they captured is genuinely unsettling once you understand what you're actually looking at. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because this isn't speculation or exaggeration. This really happened. It was documented on camera. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why the far side of the moon has fascinated and unnerved people for decades. Let's set the scene first, because the scale of this mission is almost impossible to grasp. Artemis II launched 4 astronauts, Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen, aboard NASA's Orion spacecraft. This was humanity's first crewed lunar flyby in over 5 decades, the first time human eyes had been sent this deep into space since the Apollo program ended. On April 6th, at 1:57 in the afternoon Eastern Time, the crew broke a record that had stood since 1970. They surpassed the distance traveled by the ill-fated Apollo 13 mission, becoming the farthest humans from Earth in the history of our species. Orion eventually reached a maximum distance of 252,760 miles from Earth, more than 4,000 miles beyond the previous record. If you're new here, this channel covers stories like this every single week, so make sure you hit subscribe before we go further. Because what happened during the next 7 hours of this mission is where things get genuinely eerie. As Orion continued its trajectory, the crew approached something almost no human being has ever experienced directly: the far side of the moon. Most people don't realize this, but the moon is tidally locked to Earth, meaning the same face has always pointed toward us for the entire history of human civilization. The far side, sometimes incorrectly called the dark side, has never been visible from Earth at all. Not to ancient civilizations, not to modern astronomers, not even to the Apollo astronauts who landed on the moon's near side decades ago. At their closest approach, the Artemis II crew flew within 4,067 miles of the lunar surface. For nearly 7 hours, they observed and photographed regions of the moon that had only ever been seen by robotic spacecraft, cold, distant mechanical eyes, sending back grainy images from millions of miles away. This time, human beings were looking directly out the window, and what they described seeing was almost otherworldly. The terrain on the far side is dramatically different from the familiar face we see from Earth, where the near side is marked by large, smooth, dark plains called Maria. The far side is almost entirely covered in deep, overlapping craters, ancient scars from billions of years of asteroid impacts with almost none of the smooth basaltic plains found on the side facing us. Scientists still don't fully agree on why the two hemispheres are so dramatically different from each other, and that mystery alone has puzzled researchers for decades. During the flyby, the crew captured images of massive craters like Vavilov, their edges thrown into stark relief by long, dramatic shadows stretching across the terminator, the line separating lunar day from lunar night. In some of the released photographs, the shadows are so long and severe that entire crater floors disappear into total blackness, swallowed whole even in daylight, creating an almost unnatural alien landscape unlike anything visible from Earth. But here's where the story takes its strangest turn. As Orion passed directly behind the moon, the spacecraft entered a period of complete radio blackout. For a window of time during the flyby, mission control on Earth lost all communication with the crew entirely. No telemetry, no voice contact, no way to know exactly what was happening inside that spacecraft. The moon itself, 62 miles of solid rock at its closest point, sat directly between 4 human beings and every other person alive on Earth. Imagine being inside that capsule, farther from home than any human in history, completely cut off from every other living person, staring out the window at a landscape that had never been witnessed directly by human eyes in the same moment. That silence, that total isolation from the rest of humanity, is something even seasoned astronauts describe as deeply unsettling once you really think about it. While cut off from Earth, the crew witnessed something even more extraordinary. From their position, the moon appeared large enough in their windows to completely block out the sun, creating an in-space solar eclipse that lasted nearly 54 minutes, far longer, than any solar eclipse visible from the surface of Earth. For almost an hour, the astronauts existed in a strange twilight, surrounded by the blackness of deep space, with only the faint corona of the blocked sun glowing around the silhouette of the moon. If you're the kind of person who gets chills thinking about moments like that, this channel is exactly where you want to be. So tap that subscribe button now, because we're about to get into some of the strangest images from this entire mission. When the crew emerged from behind the moon and communication with Earth was finally restored, they began transmitting thousands of photographs captured with handheld cameras during the blackout period. NASA released the first batch on April 7th, and scientific analysis of these images has continued for months since. Some of the most striking photos show what's called Earthrise and Earthset, our entire home planet reduced to a faint, fragile crescent, hanging in absolute blackness above the jagged, cratered horizon of an alien world. In one image, Earth appears as nothing more than a delicate sliver of blue light, its upper edge illuminated while the rest fades into darkness, framed against the harsh, lifeless terrain of the lunar far side in the foreground. Seeing our entire planet, every person who has ever lived, reduced to a small crescent of light against that much emptiness, is the kind of image that makes you feel almost uncomfortably small. And then there are the images of the terrain itself. Close-up shots of craters and ejecta patterns, the eastern edge of the far side heavily cratered and scarred in ways that look almost deliberately violent, like the surface was hit again and again over billions of years, with no atmosphere to ever soften or erode the damage. Unlike Earth, where wind, water, and time slowly heal scars in the landscape, the Moon has no such mercy. Every impact from the last 4 billion years is still sitting there, frozen in place exactly as it happened. Scientists studying these new images have noted specific regions along the terminator, where the interplay of extreme light and extreme shadow creates landscapes that almost don't look real, jagged silhouettes and impossibly sharp contrast between blinding white sunlight and pure, absolute black. Several researchers involved in reviewing the photographs have mentioned that some of the terrain visible in these new high-resolution shots simply hasn't been captured with this level of clarity before, even by robotic orbiters, because human eyes and human judgment behind the camera made framing and lighting choices that automated spacecraft never could. Without an atmosphere to scatter light, there's no soft transition between day and night on the Moon, the way there is on Earth, only a hard, sudden edge where illuminated ground drops instantly into total darkness. There's something genuinely unsettling about that idea if you sit with it. For over 4 billion years, that landscape existed completely unseen, hidden by the physics of tidal locking, visible only to robotic sensors relaying flat, lifeless data back to Earth. Then, for one afternoon in April of 2026, 4 human beings looked directly at it, photographed it with their own hands, and came home to tell us what they saw. NASA has stated that more images and scientific observations are still being processed and released, with researchers continuing to study the flyby data well, beyond the mission's conclusion. Some photo captions have already been updated since the initial release, as scientists continue discussing and reanalyzing exactly what certain images show. That alone tells you this data is still actively being worked through, months after the astronauts already returned safely to Earth. This mission was never meant to land on the Moon. Artemis II was designed purely as a crewed test flight, proving that Orion, its life support systems, and its navigation could safely carry astronauts around the Moon and back, clearing the path for an eventual Artemis III landing near the lunar South Pole in the years ahead. But in achieving that goal, the crew ended up delivering something arguably just as significant. The first direct human testimony and the first truly human-eyed photography of a landscape that had been utterly invisible to us for the entire span of human civilization. It's worth remembering just how different this flyby was compared to the Apollo missions decades earlier. The Apollo astronauts, who orbited and landed on the Moon, never had the opportunity to observe the far side in the way Artemis II's crew did. Their mission profiles and orbital paths simply didn't allow for it. That means, in a very real sense, more of the Moon's far side was documented by human eyes and handheld cameras during this single 7-hour flyby than during the entire Apollo program combined. Decades of spaceflight, and it took until 2026 for a crewed mission to finally give us this perspective.